What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to do a follow-up video on the video I released on Monday about how to change your release. One thing I didn't do very well is point out that when you're using your hand in those different positions, yes, it changes your release, but there's two different things that it changes on your release, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So stay tuned, I'll see you in a bit. Alright guys, so in Monday's video you recall that we talked about hand positions. We talked about how we can keep our hand coming off the ball 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and how that changes your release. In that video I mentioned that adds more axis rotation to your ball, which it does, but it also modifies your axis tilt. Modifies your axis tilt a little bit. Axis tilt is one of those things that a lot of bowlers are unable to successfully change just because it's basically every bowler's blueprint. It's kind of how they release the ball. I'm going to show you a few things here as to why it doesn't change your axis tilt nearly as much as it does your axis rotation, and also explain why I recommend using your hand in these different positions of 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 9 o'clock to achieve different axis of rotation. Hey guys, so hopefully you can hear me, but we're going to talk about a few different things here when it comes to your release. Now, what I've got here on this ball cup is my fantasy ball that I've been throwing in league, and I'm going to orient the ball in the standard position it would be in at the point of release. So, right-handed bowler, fingers of course would be here, my thumb would be here at the release point. Now, we've got two different axes that we can modify on the ball when we get our release going here. We have the axis rotation, and we have the axis tilt, which would be whether or not the ball sits here, which is 0, or has a higher degree of tilt, which that would be about 40 degrees, which is pretty high. So, I've made a few marks on my ball. On the left-hand side of the ball, I've got my positive axis point marked out. That's really my bowling ID. That is how I release the bowling ball pretty much every single time. I've also marked an X on the left side, and over on the right side, I've marked another X. Now, with the ball in this orientation, imagine, if you will, there is a pin going straight through this X all the way to this X and extending through the ball. That is the axis of the bowling ball. The way I think about this is a tire on a car. In this position we have 0 degrees of axis rotation, and we also have 0 degrees of tilt. Therefore, as the ball comes off your hand and you lift with your fingers, it's going to be rotating in this direction. What it's going to cause as far as reaction is basically nothing. It's going to go straight down the lane. It's not going to really do anything for the most part. We can, of course, change our axis tilt by taking our hand and putting our hand in the positions that I talked about the other day. So, if you remember before in my previous video, I talked about how we can put our hand in that 1 o'clock position, 12 o'clock position, 10 o'clock position, and the 9 o'clock position, and that would change your release. Now, I mentioned in that other video that it would change your axis rotation, but I neglected to say that it would also change your axis tilt. Now at the bottom here, if we were to put our hand into the 1 o'clock or the 12 o'clock position, more or less you would get this style of a release on the ball. If you were able to achieve and hold that 1 o'clock position, you might get that right there, which, as you can see, is going to tilt the axis down and give you what would be a negative axis tilt. 12 o'clock would be straight up and down, so the axis of the ball is perfectly horizontal. And if we were able to get the ball any higher, right about there is about 10 degrees of axis tilt. So you can see the X is up high on that side, down low on that side. And of course we can change that by making that adjustment with our hand. The big thing to remember is when you're making these adjustments with your hand, it is going to affect your axis tilt, but it's going to affect your axis rotation a lot more than it will your tilt. And I'm actually going to prove that here in just a moment by throwing this ball down the lane and showing you some pictures of the point the ball is at my release. So that's how we change our axis tilt. Axis rotation is the direction our fingers are rotating as they rotate up the back of the ball. This is why it's so big to make sure that when you release the ball, you stay up the back of the ball. This would be the back side of the ball. This would be 0 degrees of rotation around the axis. This would be about 40-ish, maybe 45-ish degrees of rotation as we lift through the ball like this. And of course the Pete Weber style of release, which is where the axis is facing us, so is our positive axis point. This would be 90 degrees of rotation as we come off the ball, okay? With axis tilt and axis rotation, we have similarities between the two. If we release the ball at 90 degrees, that ball is going to get its maximum amount of length down the lane and also have its maximum amount of turn down the lane. This is why a lot of the times if you watch Pete Weber bowl on the PBA, you know, old videos of him, his ball was always going really far and then snapping hard, and he was also having to stand way left and throw way right in order to basically adjust because of his release style. If we release the ball with about 40 degrees of axis rotation, the ball is going to read more of the mid lane. It's going to get through that initial dry spot in the front part of the lane. And if you release the ball with less than 40 degrees of axis rotation, so right about, you know, there, that's about 20 degrees probably, the ball is going to start reading the front part of the lane. Axis tilt can basically have a similar effect with the length the ball gets down the lane. If we have 0 degrees of tilt, the ball is going to do absolutely nothing. If we start increasing our tilt slightly, the ball is going to increase the amount of length it gets before any sort of reaction happens on the bowling ball. Obviously speaking, the most impossible to achieve would be 90 degrees of axis tilt. As you can see, that axis X is straight up, the other axis is straight down. Now, here's why I say it's impossible to change your axis tilt without affecting your axis rotation. If I try to come out of this bowling ball with my fingers in what I would call the 10 o'clock position, which is going to be here at the bottom, as you can see, once my thumb clears the ball and I start to rotate through the ball and lift with my fingers, I'm going to automatically be affecting the rotation of that bowling ball. Unless, of course, I can get my hand to come off in this direction, which, again, I haven't met any human out there who can actually make this happen with their hand. The only way I've seen this occur is actually on bowling machines, you know, such as Earl, for example, the USBC Earl bowling bot. Earl can do this because it's a robot, of course, but I've never seen a human who can get their hand in this position, clear their thumb, and rotate their fingers completely up the back of the ball like this. Because look at the position my hand is in now. We've got the ball at a tilt of what looks to be about 40 degrees, but there's no way I can get my hand out of that ball like this. My hand is just in a completely awkward position. It's twisted backwards. It hurts. So this is why I say changing your position at the point of release from 12 o'clock to 10 o'clock and to 9 o'clock is going to help you change your release and give you more rotation. But enough of me explaining to you the differences in rotation and tilt. There's plenty of videos on YouTube that do that for you. I'm going to take this ball, I'm going to keep the PAP marked, and I'm going to throw a number of shots down the lane. I'm going to throw a ball with basically as flat as I can achieve, and then my normal release, and then the maximum amount I can achieve. And I'm going to have a diagram at each part of the video where I show those releases down the lane to kind of show you how it's modifying my tilt, yes, but it's modifying my rotation a lot more. Okay guys, so there was 3 different shots. The first shot was as flat as I can get my release. It turns out that's around 20 degrees of rotation. The second shot was with my fingers coming out of the ball at the 10 o'clock position. That's right around the 40 to 45 degree mark of rotation. And then the last shot was as much rotation as I could achieve, which is what I felt like 9 o'clock, but it's nowhere close. It turns out it was just over 6 degrees of rotation. So here's a trick that you guys can use to make those changes at the bottom of your swing without having to overthink it. A lot of beginners have trouble making that initial adjustment at the bottom, and here's what I tell a lot of beginner bowlers to do with their fingers on the ball in their setting. So I've got my fantasy solid here, the ball I was just throwing. Now imagine that my hand is at the bottom of the swing, okay? This is basically the normal position that I use when I'm trying to achieve my normal style release. This gives me that 40 to 45 degree of rotation off the ball. If I'm trying to flatten the ball and get it basically to go and read the front part of the lane and roll straight, I'll take my index finger and tuck it as much as I can to my middle finger, and I'll spread my pinky out as much as I can, like that. and I'll try to achieve or maintain that position throughout my release. That's going to cause me to come up the back of the ball more, and it's going to cause that end over end roll. Now if I'm trying to achieve the maximum amount of rotation that I can achieve, I take my fingers and I switch them. So I take my index finger and I spread it out as far as I possibly can get it, and I take my pinky and I bring my pinky in as close to my index, not my index finger, but as close to my ring finger as I can get it. What this is going to do is it's going to help you get around the ball and achieve that maximum amount of rotation that you can achieve. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video. So hopefully that helps you understand why I said what I said in my previous how to change your release video. Like I said before, it's impossible to change your tilt without changing the amount of rotation you're imparting on the bowling ball. That's why taking your hand and adjusting from the 12 o'clock to the 10 o'clock to the 9 o'clock position will help you get more or less axis rotation on the ball. Also, in your setup, like we discussed earlier, if you take your fingers and adjust your fingers based on what you're trying to do, you know, tuck your index finger and spread your pinky for that up the back rotation or forward roll. Take your index finger and your pinky and spread them about that far for that about 40 to 45 degrees roll. And then take your index finger all the way out and tuck your pinky all the way in for that maximum amount of rotation that you can achieve roll. So hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.